It's time to present Scott DuPont to bring you another episode of Finance Your Movie with tips and strategies to help you get your money to tell your story. It's time!
I'm here today with fellow PGA member, producer William Garcia, a fellow Florida guy who's also now in LA. Welcome, William.
Nice to be here.
Also, quick shout out and a thank you to Zio for the introduction. We just met a week or two ago. So happy to have you on the episode. And being a line producer as well, and a very skilled veteran one, I'd love to jump in and ask you, what is the importance of a solid budget, which a top sheet is extracted that you would share with a potential investor? In two parts. Number one, confidence to you as a producer. And number two, for showing a potential investor. How important is getting this budget right?
It's extremely important to get the budgets right. And more importantly, you need to explain to the investors why you need X amount of money. Whether you're producing an independent $100,000 micro budget or a $5 or a $10 million feature film, you need to explain in that line, that actual line, that budget is going to explain how you're going to use the money. And specifically in line items. That's why a line producer, that's what that means, line items in your budget. And it's extremely, extremely, critical for a filmmaker to know exactly how much money they need. Not only how much is it going to cost for their production, but also what are they going to spend on P&A? What are they going to spend on deliverables? How are you going to market your film? All that information is in the actual document. Also, what I've noticed a lot in the industry is that filmmakers find these line producers out there that don't do a schedule. So I'll say, okay, I'm interested in your movie. I'm interested in financing your movie. Please do me a favor, send me your schedule and your budget. They're like, well, we have a budget, a top sheet, but they don't have a schedule. That right there is a huge flag for me, because how do you know? Is like, where did you determine that's a 20-day shoot? How do you know you can't shoot it in 15? Or what if you can shoot the movie in 23 days? So that's why a schedule, a detailed schedule, and a detailed budget is extremely important before you even approach investors for how much money you need for your project.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%. It's so important. And it goes both ways. Number one, you want to have that accuracy. So you're not going to start a $500,000 film and then find out 3/4 of the way through that, hey, it's actually going to cost you $650,000. That would be a huge problem. And number two, a lot of time, and I still get this myself when I'm reaching out to people to fund my films personally. Sometimes they'll say, Scott, this is great, but I don't see how you can possibly do a high quality movie for $500,000. Have you ever had that scenario where people just think it's not going to be a real movie if it's under $1 million? And then you go back to the budget and kind of justify, hey, we really can for this particular story?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also depends the investor. If it's a high net worth individual, are you talking to a family office? Most VCs don't deal in our industry. They're more like either tech or pharma. But it's very important to explain to, your quote unquote investor group that, let's say that 500,000, you can shoot an amazing movie for $500,000. I've actually filmed movies for under $500,000 that made a profit and did very well and got theatrical release, both international and domestic. So the budget is important, but it depends on the subject matter. It depends on the genre. If you have 100 locations and 56 actors, and you show me $150,000 budget, that does not make sense. But if all of a sudden you show me a very contained script in minimal locations with minimal cast and great story, then it makes perfect sense. Also, another huge mistake that I see inexperienced filmmakers do is they they will show me a $2 million budget and they want Morgan Freeman in the movie. That does not, all of a sudden they have these A-list actors, you know. That does not make financial sense. Especially I know around how much money Morgan Freeman's going to cost you. And you can't make a $1 or $2 million movie with those type of actors, you know, attached. Also, I see this all the time where you have, I hate using the term A-list, but where you have very well-known actors. We're talking, let's say right now, Timothy Chalamet. He has a first look deal with Warner. Zendaya right now, huge. I mean, the value of these two actors is up there. And I'll see them in a pitch deck with a $4 or $5 million budget. And it's like, that doesn't make sense to an experienced line producer or producer.
Yeah, that's a pet peeve of mine too. I'm not a big fan of pitch decks at all, unless you're actually pitching to a studio or a streamer, and that's not something I've ever had luck doing. But even in business plans, which is really the proven way to get money from investors, I think you're doing a disservice having these A-list stars in your business plan or in your pitch deck if they're not attached yet. And you set a very high bar, and you're going to have some really frustrated, angry investors at the end of the day when you don't deliver.
That's correct. And what's also very important is your wish list. I understand on the pitch deck if you have like, here's the wish list, but it has to make financial sense to what the pitch deck is. You know, if you're shooting a $500,000 film, you want actors that you know you'll be able to secure for anywhere between 25 to like maybe 80,000 for the lead. You know, if you're doing a schedule F, you know, that's the new schedule F, is like $80,000. So that makes a little bit more sense, but not with someone that's going to cost you, you know, what's their minimum 5, 10, $15 million. And most of those actors in that level, you know, we're talking about the actors that just have a lot of potential in the market to be able to greenlight a movie. They're looking for content, they're looking for directors, they're looking for stories that they are going to self-produce. If you know, most actors have their own production company, and sometimes you can approach those production companies and say, hey, I have an amazing script. You know, would so-and-so actor who owns part of this company be interested in reading it? Now, 99% of the time they're not. They'll say, have your agent or your attorney, you know, send us the script, but your budget needs to make sense for what type of actors you have in your film.
100%. So speaking of, you just talked about, $500,000 or less. On our first conversation when we first met, it's like, oh yeah, we did this movie Fallout. It was about 400K. Yeah, we raised the money and we shot it and it was successful, whatever.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that. What was the budget, and how specifically how that money came together? How were you able to make that film?
Yeah, how that money came together was a group of experienced filmmakers. It was myself, Matthew Brubaker, for example. He was the assistant for Robert Zemeckis. So he's been around, you know, he was there next to Robert Zemeckis learning, you know, he was there, he was his reader. And what we did is just, you put together the budget, okay? We put together a PPM, which is a private placement memorandum with a subscription agreement. And we approached independent investors to invest in the feature film. And that's how we did it. And you have what's called a raise. It's really simple. You have the pitch deck, you have the detailed budget, we had the schedule, but we also had a team. So all of a sudden we started. Now again, Followed is a horror genre film. It's a found footage kind of project. So we knew that our expenses for actors, we wanted up and coming actors, so these were young actors in their early 20s. We did hire John Savage as kind of like, okay, John Savage, for some of you might know from like the Deer Hunter. He's an Academy nominated actor, very well versed. So we attached someone that we're like, hey, we're going to bring John for like a day or so, as a kind of named, attachment cast to it. And then what we did was just approach individual investors and say, are you interested in, say 1 unit for $10,000? Are you interested in 2 units for $20,000? And we just raised the financing that way. Now, how we did it though was after we finished the film, then we went out and started shopping the movie to different distributors. And we did. We got some distributors both internationally and, here domestically. And it was released during the pandemic. Looking back at it, I think maybe we should have held on to the film, but it did go theatrical. I would say, I think it was like 2021 or so. And we did hit like #1 for a couple of weekends. But, I was at the height kind of the pandemic and drive-throughs and stuff. But that's a perfect example of how you raise money for, I consider anything under $1 million for me, I consider micro budget. So any movies that you produce for 300, 400,000, most of those type of movies are raised through friends, family, business associates, and you basically put together a legal document that gives you the ability to raise that money for your film. But it is high risk, and we have those documents that will let the investors know that, be aware that this is a high risk venture. Mm-hmm.
So congratulations on getting that done.
Yeah.
Theatrical release and #1 for a short time, and now you can see the film if you want to see it now on certain streaming platforms. I want to drill down a little bit in that process. So you've got a polished business plan, you've got a veteran team of people together. Did you face some rejection? Were there a lot more no's than yeses? Did it take a while? Was it easy? Was it hard?
Raising equity is the most difficult thing that any filmmaker is going to do. And let me explain the difference between equity and debt. Okay. Absolutely, it is very difficult. We got 1,000 no's for 1 yes. And here's the challenge for most filmmakers out there. An experienced producer can easily finance what's called soft money, which means is the last money in, first money out. The tax credit monetization, simple. There are so many organizations out there, banks, production company investors that will invest into the tax credit. Same thing with pre-sales. If you raise, say, for example, you have a pre-sale contract for whatever, $1 million, you can find different financial institutions that will lend you the money against those contracts. The issue for all of us in this game that we love, and I love the film industry I've been in for years, is equity. That means that first investor that's going to invest the first money into your project. And that is always the challenge in this industry. And I even have been approached by very experienced producers that are like, I have this $8 million movie. I have $6 million in financing in place. What that means is they have pre-sales, they have very well-known actors attached, not LOIs or interest like signed contract, but yet they can't move forward with production because they're missing 2 million out of their whatever $8 million. And they're looking for that $2 million to move the project to production.
So
very, very difficult.
Whether it's the first equity investor, the second, third, fourth, however investors you end up to get your cash, That's what we're talking about. You said you got one yes for 1,000 no's. Roughly how many people did you reach out to? No exaggeration, just want the
Oh my God. I would say out of the 35 investors that we have about 30, 35.
that was your final number you ended up with?
Our final number was about 30.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
You're talking about, I would be guessing, but there's like four of us. I would say at least 3,000 people we had conversations with for those
Wow.
30 people. And it took a long time. It
I,
took
I
a
want
long
I
time.
want I want to rewind. I want
Yeah.
the whole audience to hear this. You raised all your money. You had 4 producers. Roughly how many people do you think you reached out to?
Oh man, thousands. I'm not exaggerating. I'm
There you
not
go. There you go.
exaggerating.
You just said the secret. You just
Yeah.
shared the secret. Because I have so many friends, they'll reach out to 20, 50, 100 people. It's like, oh, nobody invested. Sorry. Got to keep
No.
on going.
And let me explain. I like to use the analogy of a train. Okay. And here's the challenge. Perceive your movie as a train and you're at the station. Okay. And it's not moving. The first investor that comes in and puts that first money in, that's the one that's the most difficult. Because as the train starts moving and you start getting more and more investors on that train and the train is moving, it becomes easier because and then all of a sudden the investor's not by themselves. That's always the, well, I don't know who you are. What are the investors you have? Once you have a group of investors and you're like, yeah, here you can talk to these investors, they're on board. They've already signed an LOI or they provided, funding that's on hold, in our account or it's in an escrow and that becomes a little easier. Again, back to what I was saying, last money in, first money out is the easiest because let's just say your $1 million project. Let's just say out of the $1 million, we're going to go shoot wherever. Let's just say New Orleans, and we're going to get back 200,000. Let's just make it simple in tax credit. That's easy. You can take that financial document from the state of whatever, California, New Orleans, Georgia, and there's so many companies out there that will say, "Oh, I'll give you the money for that." Now they're going to charge you a financing fee. There's going to be an executive producer fees. There's going to be all these fees attached. But that's the easy financing to find. We're talking about how you put a project together. If you're shooting $1 million movie, you don't need $1 million of cash. Usually, if you have anywhere between 50 to 70% of cash, you can finance the rest of it by either pre-sales or by tax credit, monetizing your tax credit. So it's tricky. It's a lot of fun, but the equity,
Yeah,
the challenge.
but the great thing is you've done it multiple times on many different films, and apparently you have a new film that's going to be coming out early next year. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Here again is a perfect example of how you put films together. It's a feature film called Rally Caps. It stars Judd Hirsch, Amy Smart, Carson Manier. It's a wonderful film. It's based on an intellectual property, a book. Uh, so all of a sudden it has this traction, and that again was the same. Remember about the attachments? Is that the producers, first of all, there's like 5 of us. There's like 5 producers, in this film. So you have 5 producers out there, and we didn't have any talent attached. But the minute that we got in the first money in, we attached Judd Hirsch. We
Pay or
attached
play.
Amy Smart. Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. You sign the document and then you give yourself time to finance it. Usually you want to give yourself like 9 months, a year and say, hey, and you go after these actors and say, do you want to do this? So all of a sudden, as you start attracting talent to the project, remember the train? The train's now all of a sudden you got You have talent attached, it becomes a little bit easier. Again, it's difficult, but we were able to raise the money that way. I can't release the total amount because that
Sure.
movie is on the high end, and we're right now talking to different distributors, but that's how
But
it's
you got it
done.
done. You got it done.
But there's something else you guys got to also remember. So how else are we going to raise money for our movie? So think about it. Rally Caps is what? It's like for those of you from the Bad News Bear era, you know, it's a baseball coming of age kind of movie. What does that movie have that we can raise some money? Product placement and product integration. So there was a team of just two producers, and these amazing ladies from New York, all they focused on is what? Bringing in actual product placement and product integration to continue to finance the movie. So we were able to get some sponsorship from Major League Baseball. Okay,
Wow.
so we can remember you got to use it's a Major League Baseball. You got the teams, the Orioles, the Yankees. You have to obtain permission to use all that. So we approached that. We got permission from Wilson. We got also Cochlear Implant, which is a technology-based company that deals with individuals who have lost their hearing. And we actually utilize that technology in our film because our film deals with a deaf baseball player that inspires a young boy who had just lost his father. So all of a sudden, that's where you can also raise money, you know,
Awesome.
and I'm not joking, even hot dogs. You know, we went to Hoffman's, you know, hot dogs, and we're like, hey, and it was an exchange. Can you feed the crew some hot dogs? You know, we used it as snacks. You know, our big shoots, you know, when all of a sudden we have a lot of extras and stuff, they came in with their cart and they started feeding hot dogs. So it was an exchange of product placement and product integration. And to explain that really quick, because I think the audience is like, what's the difference? Product placement is, for example, um, the real famous one is the first Superman movie. You had the Cheerio, you know, cereal box on the table, right? So they just showed the product. That's product placement, right? They give you a little bit of money, quite a bit of money. Now, product integration is you use the product in the scene. Coca-Cola and your actor drinks the Coca-Cola or pours a beer, shows the use of the product within the scene, or talks about the product within the scene and integrates it. It could be as simple as, you know, for example, the famous Castaway, Wilson.
Yeah,
I mean,
Wilson.
that was a major character. You know, same thing with FedEx. That's a product placement, product integration, because part of the story dealt with the actual product.
And you get
So
some
hopefully
money.
that'll get some idea. And you get some money.
Yeah.
Again, I'm going to give even more information. You don't get the money up front. It doesn't work that way. People are like, oh, you got $250,000 from this thing. It doesn't work that way. How it works is you sign an agreement. They give you a little bit of the money, say 25%. Then when you shoot the product, they give you, and then the remaining 50%. And then the last 25% is usually provided, you know, as a return to you, like that payment to you is usually when it's released. So be aware that, say you get a product placement deal for something small, $100,000, right? You don't get $100,000 right into your bank. You get a contract that states this is what the tranches are for that money. But what can you do with that? You can borrow against it. There's investors that are like, oh, so you have $100,000 on a contract from this company. I'll give you, you know, 100,000, but I'm going to want a financing fee or a back end or whatever it might be. And that's how you can finance your movie.
Yep. Well said. Well said. So, you mentioned that you sometimes will do budgets or schedules or help other filmmakers out, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's been my bread and butter for the last, I would say, 10 years. And it's been as a line producer for schedules, budgets. I work in the Movie Magic, you know, software program. That's the industry standard, and that's what I was trained was on the Movie Magic software. Mhm.
So what's the best way if somebody is at that early stage, they haven't started raising money yet, and they want to reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, the best way to contact me is info at Playworld Pictures. That's my email. That's info at, and then the name of the company is playworldpictures.com. You can also visit my company's website, which is playworldpictures.com. And we provide different executive producer services for filmmakers that require our assistance. We also sometimes are looking for scripts, but we don't look for scripts that have like directors and producers attached. So that's also something your audience should know, that if you want to direct a movie and you want to produce a movie, that means you're going to have to package that movie. If you're a writer and you just want to sell your script, like sell the script, then you're gone. They're going to option it. They're going to pay you your money, and you're out. That's something different than if all of a sudden you're like, well, no, I want to, this is what I wrote. This is I call it my Rocky, which is the Sylvester Stallone story, which is, this
Your
is my
baby.
baby. This is my baby. I want to take it from beginning to end. That means that more than likely, you're not going to be able to just sell that script, because once you sell the script, you lose control. So if you're an individual that has a project that you want to see from script all the way to screen and be part of the creative process, that means you're going to have to come in as a producer on that film and be responsible for raising at least partial of the money.
Great advice. We're up against a time window here. William Garcia, thank you so much for taking your time today. I know how busy you are. You enlightened all of us. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It was great being here. Thanks so much.
It's time!
There's never been a better time to make your own film. And if you have a dream project you're excited about and 100% committed to getting it funded, go to financeyourmovie.com, click on the green telephone, you'll see our calendar and find an open spot. We'll do a one-on-one call, which will be the best hour you've ever spent getting clarity and strategy towards financing your movie.